Hi, everyone. So today we carry on. This is, I guess, the fifth episode of my series on the Russian immigration. And when I say the Russian immigration, after the Bolshevik invasion, after the Bolsheviks seized power in 1917, that's just the subjects of the Russian Empire, mostly Russians, indeed, Jews and Georgians. That's the three, I would say, topics, the three nations that interest me the most because of the nature of my work. But I would say that we still will talk about many things alongside with that. Anyway, so the after we discussed a lot of political entities, after we discussed the story of the espionage and a lot of scandals of KGB, well, at that point it was just the NKVD. Basically, it's the predecessor of KGB agents infiltrating Paris and operating there in the broad daylight, assassinating and abducting the leaders of the White Army resistance movement. Well, and a lot of scandals within that, and lots of conspiracy theories around it. I'm sure you well, you kind of have that idea how how it all worked and how difficult it was to survive and how people tried to fight their homesickness on the one hand, but also how they tried to make plans for the future, or maybe they tried not to. Many things. It was really complex, and immigration is never easy, but especially when it is done because you have to do it, the forced immigration. But many people also found some refuge in drinking, in going out, especially because the times, well, they call the Anfoli. I hope and the fall, sorry, and fall. It was the crazy times. That's exactly what it means. And yes, this is Josephine Baker. Whenever you look for NFL, Paris, 1920s, and it ended up with the Wall Street crisis, 1929, which affected the rest of the world, mainly obviously Europe and the States. Yes, she clearly is the symbol of those crazy times. Parties, restaurants, cabarets. Yeah, Paris never slept, and Russian immigrants as well. We know of a lot of immigrants forming different societies, Russian artists and writers hanging out in numerous cafes. We spoke of several of them, such as Le Rotonde, where a lot of Georgian artists mingled with French artists, such as Vladimir Nabokov, who hanged out with Matisse, Picasso, and Modigliani, and a lot more. Not Matisse. Matisse didn't hang out with Gudashvili, sorry, Modigliani did. And we obviously spoke a lot of spies that mingled with just exactly the same time, the same streets and the same busy cafes. We spoke about it. And but was it we also know that a lot of Russian immigrants, not, I would say, the former Romanovs and former aristocrats, I would say, uh, didn't really, well, had to work really hard to make ends meet, and many worked in the car factories. We know that many worked as taxi drivers, and taxi drivers formed a kind of a closed club, and Russian taxi drivers were the most favorite. And in general, the French were quite welcoming to the immigrants. For for a long time in general. And it was because the Russians were uh, well, they worked. They were a workforce, which was not enough after the First World War, and well, they didn't require really high salaries. They could have been paid less than the average. That was also true. And yeah, there were a lot of famous Russian. There were a lot of Russian aristocrats who were well, who kind of became part of the elite. This is the photo of the former star, right? Nadezhda Plevitskaya. This is the photo I showed you, one of the last of the previous tour. So she used to be the singer number one for the Russian audience. She used to be the favorite singer of Nicholas II before the revolution, and her husband was involved in the scandal. Her husband actually had been for a long time, and probably she herself. She was also found guilty. She was in espionage in favor of the Soviet Union, and she was in prison. And her husband, as you know, participated in several abductions and assassinations of the White Army representatives. And well, that was the end of her career. And there was a big scandal that the entire Paris closely followed for 14 months. And after that very big abduction of one of their army, of one of the White Army representatives, well, some Parisians started to get a little bit more, well, kind of wary, a little bit scared, and plus, well, yeah, okay. For those 10 years, things were going crazy. People were busy enjoying themselves after the First World War. Economies were recuperating, and people were enjoying themselves, and everybody had enough work. Or more or less, everybody had more or less enough work. But things started to change towards Russian immigrants with Paul Doumer, the president of France in the 1930s. And he wasn't against the Russian immigrants. No, there's just something happened that completely turned the French society against Russian immigrants. Paul Doumer was assassinated. He was to attend one of the book festivals that was arranged by the First World War veterans. It was held here in this place, and several sons of Paul Doumer died at the First World War, so for him it was an important event to attend, and it was announced that he would be attending. So I guess it was a mistake. So they were not supposed to, they well, shouldn't have announced the visit of the president, but nevertheless, he was killed. As he was leaving the fair, he was assassinated in the broad daylight. He was shot in the chest several times, and he was wounded and taken to hospital, where he passed away within several hours. That was it. So that was it. That was done, 1932. And who killed him? Well, a Russian immigrant, Paul Gorgulov, or Pavel Gorgulov. This is the photo taken, I guess, around the same time. And immediately, obviously, after big scandals, actually at that time, I would say that even with the KGB involved, well, NKVD involved, still, I would say that largely Russians were seen as the, I would say, positive thing. Indeed, they were seen positively. But with this murder, first, everybody thought that KGB was involved. Well, but later they found out that KGB had nothing to do with it. It was all the initiative of Gorgulov, who immigrated the Russian Empire, well, after the Bolsheviks invasion. And he also was in those camps in Gallipoli in Turkey. That's the first episode we did together about several months ago. After that, we've been to Serbia. After that, we've been to the Czech Republic, and then we were in Berlin for several episodes, and now Paris. And there will be a few more, for sure. Not just Paris, but also a few more areas in Europe where Russian immigrants settle down, and then the States as well. But I'm not going into so many details. With Paris, it's just so many things to talk about. But Gorgulov was not associated with any entities. He was not a member of the all-military Russian Union, which was the official organization that was formed by the former White Army veterans. No, he was just on his own. He thought that after, as he explained further on to the police after he was interrogated, that he hoped that if a Russian kill the French president, then France would start war to eliminate Stalin. Right? That's crazy. Absolutely. And um, there was medical expert. He was examined. He was examined and interrogated, and there was psychologists, psychiatric expertise was carried out. He was totally sane. Uh, he he understood what he was doing, but and he was put in prison, obviously. So and of course, France didn't start war against Stalin, no, but after that, a lot of Parisians got really hostile towards Russian immigrants. Plus, the economic situation in the country. The Russians were just taking their workplaces. The country was in crisis, and yeah, so there were a lot of um, protests asking to get rid of Russians. There were a lot of protests complaining about the penetration of spies into the country and everything. Obviously, for a long time, many Parisians just wouldn't want to believe that Gorgulov hadn't been associated with any secret services from the Soviet Union because it 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 just really aligned so much with what everybody was thinking because many people it was I would say it was in the air basically that they were thinking, okay, is this Russian a spy or not? Is this Russian a Soviet agent or not? So people started to get more cautious, which it wasn't really a hysteria, but uh, things were not looking well for Russians indeed, and they had less work, and it affected all the businesses. That is true. It just started getting really more and more difficult, and in the 1930s, it's well, these are by the way the illustrations from the trial. Obviously, mm, shortly after that, like where would they go? To Berlin? Yes, okay, they could go to Berlin, but in 1933, we already know what happened. So Hitler's party won at the elections, and things started to, well, not looking good there either. So some Russians started to immigrate. Some decided to go to the States, and they were very right about it. It was a very right move, but it didn't look like that at that time. Obviously, it was more just, I would say, out of hopelessness, basically. But well, further on, many would immigrate to the States because of the same situation. But if Ivan Bunin stayed, and Ivan Bunin would become that Russian that changed that, I would say, wave of hostility towards Russian immigrants. And again, there wasn't violence towards Russian immigrants. No, it was just hostility and, mm, well, some discrimination, but I'm not saying it was unjust. I'm just saying that how it was. I'm not complaining or anything, obviously. And Ivan Bunin changed everything because he would be given the Nobel Prize. And this would immediately also mean the recognition from from the entire Europe, basically, for his work. And his work, his literature work, it was all about Russia as well. And he was given the Nobel Prize for the preservation of Russian literature in exile. Just to remind you, Ivan Bunin came to France with his wife, Vera Muromtseva. But for a long time, she was just his civil partner. But then he was able to get divorced, and they got married in France. He moved after he was given um, well, after he finally started to get published and was given help by one of the Jewish merchants, he was able to move from Paris to Grasse. And he and his wife lived in a house. The house is still there, It's not a museum, however, it's a private property. There are some memorial plaques on the house, but it's just such a shame that this is the photos from Graz, by the way. And Bunin never left. So Bunin stayed throughout the Nazi occupation. That's the house. That again, it's a shame there's no museum. It's in private hands, and it's apparently they're trying to turn it into a hotel. The place needs some restoration for sure. Many sources claim that inside it looks just the same way it looked during the times of the Bunins. I don't know. I've never been there, so that's what it says in one of them on the road next to the house. There's also a memorial plaque on the house itself, but no museum status. No, it's just a private house, and I just dread to think what might happen to all the belongings in there. If they are there, it's just well, I don't even want to think what's going to happen to all the belongings and memorial items. And uh, as I said, it wasn't easy for Russian writers in general, Russian translators, because they were paid, they were published. There were a lot of media, Russian language media. There were newspapers, there were journals, there were newspapers of, I would say, different kind, democratic newspapers, the newspapers released by the monarchist groups, many social revolutionary groups, anyone. They were there. Bunin established this Russian Writers Union, and he became its president, and that kept him afloat also professionally, because for a long time he struggled when he just moved in, and financially he struggled, and he didn't really have much inspiration because that was stress, and everyone's handle stress differently, especially people of the creative professions. You never know what happens to your inspiration. Luckily for Bunin, after seeing a lot of friends, and in Graz they hosted a lot of friends for weeks, for months. For example, this is Sergei Rachmaninov, Russian composer, who stayed for many months in Graz with Bunin and his wife, Vera Muromtseva. Um, and Bunin, from the very beginning, became Plevitskaya was the singing voice of the Russian immigration. Well, used to be, no more. And Bunin became the written word of the Russian Revolution, of the obviously of Russian immigrants after the revolution. I mean, sorry. We heard the cannons, we saw the columns of smoke, and knew the world we were born into had ended. It didn't die; it was murdered. And Bunin was one of the last people that was able to evacuate from St. Petersburg and then from Crimea. That's from where all the immigrants managed to flee to Turkey. And also then Georgians would flee from Batumi to Turkey as well. That was the most ordinary itinerary. Some would go different, some would go through the north, but that's more of an exception. And we will be talking about Helsinki, we will be talking about Tallinn. Yeah, they were actually immigrants even in Tunisia, by the way. There was quite a big community, to be honest. Yeah, but that's a different story. I'm not sure whether I'll be able to have enough content for the tour, but I might be able just to add some words about it on one of the following tours. And um, I would like to just read some excerpts of what Bunin wrote about his memories of St. Petersburg, his memories of the past life, and his thoughts on the revolution and its aftermath. And I would say these are good translations. He he's he was when he left Russia, when he had already been an acknowledged writer. So he basically had to start things almost from scratch. And it took him less time to get back to the same level of recognition because he just got so prolific. And he was able to get recognition from his own compatriots. So they were in this together. So I guess it still was quite a long way to go before the Nobel Prize would be given to him. He was nominated 5 times for the Nobel Prize, and eventually he would be given it. There was once Russia, a great house bursting at the seams with every kind of treasure, inhabited by a mighty family built for the blessed labors of countless generations, sanctified by reverence for God, by memory of the past, and by all that we call culture and tradition. And what did they do to it? This degenerate, a moral idiot from birth, Lenin, presented to the world at the height of his reign something unspeakable, staggering. He ruined the greatest country in the world and killed millions of people. And now, in broad daylight, people still argue whether he was a benefactor of humanity or not. That's some of his earlier works. That was still during the times of Lenin. And one of the first, well, I would say one of the best books that was already released in immigration. This one, by the way, was released in Russian in New York. It says here in New York, was The Dark Alleyways. And this is the collection of short novels. And these short stories are my favorite. So The Dark Alleys is really my favorite. And it's all about the stories of love. It's all about the reminiscences of the past. It's all about nostalgia and homesickness. And whenever you read that, it seems like you go through this on your own. It's like whatever you're reading, you have been through it yourself, even though you may have not. So it's just, I don't know. I'm really short for words when it gets to the dark alleys, but I would like to provide some of the reviews and also some of the translations of some bits of it. So the Dark Alley is the only book in the history of Russian literature devoted entirely to the concept of love. But it's not only love, it's love, it's the separation, it's the memories and regrets. And it's more than that, but yes, it's all about love. There's no politics there, it's just love. Those stories are characterized by dark, erotic liaisons and love affairs that are, according to James B. Woodward, who was a big scholar of Russian literature, marked the contradiction that emerges from the interaction of a love that's enamored in sensory experience and physicality with a love that is supreme, if ephemeral, the solution of the self. And I really, really like this quote. By the way, I think you can even find this quote in Wikipedia. This is a long excerpt. I just gonna read just several lines from it, but it's just the description of well, it's just impeccable. That summer, I wore my student cap for the first time and was filled with that special kind of happiness, the joy of entering a young, free life that comes only in that season of one's soul. I had grown up in a strict noble family in the countryside, and as a young man, though I dreamt passionately of love, I remained pure in both body and spirit. I would blush at the coarse talk of my schoolmates, and they would wrinkle with their noses and say, "You'd be better off becoming a monk, Miss Shersky." And then later on, in the end, and so I came to the estate of my mother's brother, retired and long widowed Ohlan Cherkasov, and his father is the father of his only daughter, my cousin Sonia, and then the story of him and the impossible love between him and his cousin Sonia. Yes. Yeah. Or the story about Caucasus. Interesting, quite unexpected in the end. He searched for her in Galenjik, so the woman he fell in love with, the girl he fell in love with in Gagra in Sochi. The day after he arrived in Sochi, he swam in the sea in the morning, then shaved, put on clean underwear, a snow-white tunic, had breakfast on the hotel restaurant's terrace, drank a bottle of champagne, sipped coffee with chartreuse, and leisurely smoked a cigar. Returning to his room, he lay down on the sofa and shot himself in the temples with 2 revolvers. That story about love. Yeah. But he wouldn't be given a Nobel Prize for the dark alleyways. It would be given for a different work piece. And before we get down to that work, we need to talk about the another source of inspiration, the additional source of inspiration that he needed, and that was Galina Kuznetsova, who was also Russian immigrant, a poet, a writer, a translator, like all of them were. I'm pretty sure had I been in the same time in their situation, I would have become a translator myself. I'm pretty sure and I probably would be, again, just as poor and as hungry as most of them. I would have been miserable, I'm pretty sure. But I might have been quite prolific also in that misery. So Galina Kuznetsova, just like because Bunin was in charge of the writers' union, he kept in touch with many aspiring writers, and he would be sent a lot of letters because young artists needed writers, poets needed support, and they would be looking for the support from Bunin and the community. And Galina Kuznetsova, they started exchanging letters, and then he invited her to Rus, and she came seeking for some advice. Bunin had already revised some of her works before that, and he liked them, and he thought she was a talented writer. And then she came, and that he had been living together with Vera Muromtsova, so his wife. But Galina Kuznetsova stayed for several years. They lived, the three of them: Bunin, his wife Muromtsova, and Kuznetsova. That's the photo of the three of them. And well, was Muromtseva okay with that? Well, we don't have a lot of evidence of that, actually. But what we know is that both women, um, they participated in typing of all the works, of all the novels, and they basically would be his secretaries. And with Vera Muromtseva, he would be he would be asking for her recommendations. He would be asking for her opinion. And with Kuznetsova, he would never ask what she thought, but he would just prefer to spend time with her. She was like 30 years younger than Muromtseva. She was, I think, in her late 20s, maybe early 30s. And to everyone else, he would say that she was his adopted child, like an adopted daughter, basically. Because how else could you explain a girl living with your house, a girl that was 30 years younger than you? Yeah, that's a good question. And if you want to know more from Kuznetsova herself, then Grish, could you please close the curtain, the white curtain? No, no, curtain, the white curtain. Curtain, yes, just close it like that. Good. Sorry, my boys are packing up because we're heading tomorrow morning for Batumi, and I'm not packing, so I'm chilling. This book was translated in the 19 in after the Second World War, The Grass Diary. It's don't look for, I would say, a lot of spicy details. Obviously, yes, they were close with Bunin, but she's not describing that in the Grass Diary. In the Grass Diary, she remembers just Bunin, what it was like, what his work was like, what other people came to see him. And yeah, we don't know much what Vera really went through those days, that's for sure. So they lived like this for several years, and actually even more. I will talk about it. There are a lot of photos of Grass taken in Grass, the three of them together, and you can find them in open access. But also there's another source, and there's just a little bit of the quotes from that diary. A sultry, magnificent day, the sea has drawn close and lies along the horizon like a vast blue haze. So bright it lifts the heart, the sky has paled from the abundance of light, and the wide spreading pine in its brilliance and azure is beautiful. After breakfast with Ivan Bunin, IA is his initials, Ivan Alexeyevich, and I lay in the canvas chairs under a palm tree, talking about literature, about what it takes to become a true writer. Today, for the first time, he's dressed entirely in white. It suits him very well. He's lean and slender, almost boyishly so. She obviously liked him. But again, I would say it's mostly about just describing what the life was like in general. And also another quote. Again, I'm not going to read all of this, but it's just a nice look into what their life was like. He's always said that dry summer days should be treated as work time, not wasted in idleness. And today he added, only at your age can you build real discipline for the future. Go on now. So Bunin also saw it as patronship. So he patronized Kuznetsova and he helped her polish her style, polish uh, her written language. And so the Grass Diary it wasn't obviously supervised by him. It was written after she, yes, she left him. I will get to that. But yes, you could clearly see that her language. I haven't read many of her works written before the Grass Diary, but well, I read some Grass Diary in Russian, not in translation, and you could see a lot more of Bunin's there for sure. You can read you can sense some Bunin there. Yes. So, and it says here, so this is in Russian, but it says it's a book about Ivan Bunin and Russian immigration. So basically, she left the account of, of what life was like for the Russian immigration, just, I would say, illustrated by the life of one family. And Galina Kuznetsova was apparently the main source of inspiration for Bunin. So, she moved in with him to him in 1933. And in 1935, and shortly after she moved in, like several months after she moved in with them, he got down to writing the biggest work of his life, The Life of Arseniev, which is basically, well, yeah, it has the fictional character, and the protagonist is clearly inspired. It was clearly himself, and this protagonist just keeps reminiscing about the past. It's full of regrets, it's full of illusions, it's full of nostalgia. It's heartbreaking to read. And for this, this book, why Bunin was so incredibly good, he was good at turning the written text into images. So he was able to achieve that. As you read, you picture everything you read. And that's why he's loved for. And that's exactly the book he would be given a Nobel Prize. Yeah, so this is um, I know that all the students of the Slavic studies would study the life of Arseniev. It would be one of the staples for them. There's a lot of critical literature and research literature about this book, and this is just one of them by Andrew Baruch Wachtel. It's a big book. He's one of the biggest researchers of Bunin's legacy, that's for sure. And for that, for for the preservation of the Russian culture, for the preservation of the Russian language, and the Russian memory and legacy, he was given the Nobel Prize. There, just a little quote, just some quotes from the life of Arseniev. There was no past anymore, only a dream. I walked among strangers, a dead man walking in a living world. Russia was behind me like a sunken ship. The scent of apples, the buzzing of flies on a hot August day, the heavy silence of the orchard. These are my first memories. Everything else, cities, people, wars, came after. And I want to read that too. So that's Arseniev, aka Bunin himself remembers his childhood. I grew up among fields, forests, and meadows. Morning mist over the river, birdsong at dawn, the scent of grass and ripening grain surrounded me from my earliest years. It seemed to me that all living things were ensouled. The trees spoke, the wind knew my thoughts, and the river heard my sorrows. Life was serene and mysterious. Everything that would later be called adulthood still lay far off in another universe, unrelated to this morning, damp, golden reality. Haven't we all been there, regardless of where we all come from, right? And when we were born? And you could picture that, right? Even in this translated form, you can picture everything he's talking about. And it's a translation. One more, please forgive me. It was the last night before my departure. I stepped out into the garden. The wind rustled the leaves. The moon hung above the old cherry tree. Everything was as it had always been, yet none of it was mine anymore. I know the feeling. It seemed that time itself had paused to bid me farewell, and my heart ached with sweet pain. I didn't know what I was waiting for, but I knew this would never happen again. No more nights like this, no more sense, no more earth beneath my bare feet. Yes, so I think it was good enough. Definitely worth the Nobel Prize. Um, she now lives somewhere far away, or perhaps no longer live at all. That's about the love he remembered from the past life. But in my memory, she remained the same, in a white dress, with the shadow of lashes on her cheeks, with that unique expression of tenderness and sorrow that only women who love forever possess. I did not seek her out, did not write, everything had passed. But often in the evenings I would hear footsteps in the silence, and my heart would answer with her name. It just resonates, right? Even if we haven't been through this, it still resonates. I might be biased though, I might be, but apparently I wasn't the only one who agreed, since he would be given a Nobel Prize. So, sorry for this lengthy quote, but I guess it just doesn't make sense to talk about writers and not really quote them, right? Especially if they were that cool. Anyway, so on a bright sunny morning in 1935, Ivan Bunin went to the cinema to watch the film where the daughter of his best friend, Kuprin, Ksenia Kuprina or Kista Kuprin, starred. It was a silent film. I spoke about Kista Kuprina as one of the one of the Russians who found, I would say, who was able to become someone. Actually, she became the star of the silent movies. We know also that a lot of former Romanovs and Yusupovs and some also former German aristocrats, girls, ladies became models for fashion homes such Chanel and Van, Schiaparelli, and many, many others. So Kista Kuprin also would become model, but also she was a movie actress, a silent movie actress. So as he was watching the film, so he was watching The Pearl apparently, and there should be music, but I'm just silencing this. And as he was watching, another writer that was also staying in Graz, by the way, came to tell him that he had the news. He had a phone call, so that Bunin had been given the Nobel Prize, and he had to leave the cinema. And he was more worried about not being able to see how Kisa would be playing her role. And from then on, for 2 years, and from then on for 2 years, he would be living in hell, as he explained himself. But I also wanted to share with you his Nobel Prize speech, which is important because it also reflects his own attitude to the Russian immigration, to the situation around the Russian immigrants. Again, and when I say Russian, I just say the former residents of the Russian Empire, subjects of the Russian Empire. And also his life in Paris. There are videos of his life in France, his travels, just a little bit.
Je suis très heureux pour moi-même et surtout pour la littérature russe. J'espère d'aller personnellement à Stockholm pour recevoir le prix Nobel et pour remercier l'Académie suédoise pour le grand honneur qui a couronné l'œuvre de toute ma vie.
I obviously found it on YouTube. I just recorded this video. And there is also another video. I decided not to include that. So the speech altogether, the speech at the banquet of the Nobel Prize lasted like for 4 minutes. But he realized that he appreciated how much the Russian legacy was valued in Europe, in France, in Sweden, and he appreciated that, and he saw that as the award, which was about $1 million. It was very big money. So he saw it as a great way to support also a lot of writers that were in a lot less fortunate situation. And I also found a video of Bunin. It's also on, it's from YouTube. Basically, there is an audio of him reciting his own poem. It's called Loneliness. It's in Russian for those of you who can't read in Russian, but obviously have an English translation. And so there's the audio, and someone on YouTube decided just to add some footage of Bunin as we're going to hear himself reciting his own poem. But let's read the English version first to understand what he's talking about. The loneliness, the wind and the rain and the mist over cold, desolate waves. Here life has ceased to exist. The gardens lie barren for days. I'm alone at the dacha again. By the easel, it's chilly and dim, and the wind whistles into the pane. And we're here, just yesterday's whim, but even then you seem sad, already weary of me. And toward evening, so drear and so bad, you felt almost like a wife to me. Well, then farewell. Somehow I'll stay on my own till the spring comes my way. Today, the same clouds go by. Layer on layer they sweep. Your footprints have faded, lie washed out the rain by the steep. And it hurts to gaze alone into twilight's dull, ashen tone. I wanted to cry, come back. I've grown used to you, can't you see? But for women, the past is a track. Once love fades, you're a stranger to be. Well then, I'll light the fire, drink deep. It might help to buy a dog to keep. 1906, that's a very early one, a very early poem.
Одиночество, и ветер, и дождик, и мгла над холодной пустыней воды. Здесь жизнь до весны умерла, до весны опустели сады. Я на даче один, мне темно за мольбертом и дует в окно. Вчера ты была у меня, Но тебе уж тоскливо со мной. Под вечер ненастного дня ты мне стала казаться женой. Что ж, прощай, как-нибудь до весны проживу я день без жены. Сегодня идут без конца те же тучи, гряда за грядой. Твой след под дождем у крыльца расплылся, налился водой. И мне скучно глядеть одному предвечернюю серую тьму. Мне крикнуть хотелось во след: воротись, я сроднился с тобой. Но для женщины прошлого нет. Разлюбила и стал ей чужой. Что ж, камин затоплю, буду пить. Хорошо бы собак купить.
Yes. So as I said, the speech would only last for 4 minutes, and Kuznetsova and Muravtseva both would be there. He would introduce Kuznetsova as his adopted daughter, and but well, as I said, eventually Kuznetsova would leave him. But yes, it was difficult to reject the idea that Kuznetsova was the main source of inspiration behind the life of Arseniev. But for 2 years, it would be the time when everyone would be asking money from Bunin. Bunin was never good with money. Yeah, he was selfish and he was an egoist. Yes, he cheated on his own wife under her own nose. I mean, behind the bedroom wall. Yes, that is also true. But he was never a greedy one. He was never a Scrooge. And basically, he was able to pay off the debts, and then he basically within less than 2 years went absolutely broke because he had given away all the money. And also, after that, Galina Kuznetsova, that's her. Actually, on the same time they went to Stockholm for the Nobel Prize dinner. And they stayed at the house of a good friend, a philosopher, Stepun. And that's where Galina Kuznetsova was introduced to Marta Stepun, or Margarita Stepun, who was wife to the philosopher, a good friend of Bunin. And eventually she left Bunin and started living with Stepun. So Margarita Stepun left her husband. Kuznetsova left Bunin, and they started dating each other and living together. That was a big scandal. Bunin, she gave Bunin really hard time. Stepun the husband was also inconsolable, but nothing could be done. There are not so many photographs of them together, by the way. There's only one photograph of them together, and that's Stepun, the further Stepun. I don't expect you to know him, obviously. And they would see each other quite frequently, but again, he never really commented on why she left him. She never really commented why she left Bunin as well. But yes, everyone knew that she openly lived with another woman, which at that time was still a bit of a scandal. And we wouldn't have known all of that. But thanks to one man, there are some photographs and some letters from Bunin to Kuznetsova, and also some love letters from Marta Stepun to Kuznetsova, and some photographs that we have thanks to René Guérin, a French Slavist and a collector. And it's a bit of an interesting character. There are a lot of interviews with him, and it's a bit of a dodgy story, actually. He claims that he he became a good friend of Stepun and Kuznetsova. He was a friend of many people, indeed. So we're talking here already, well, I would say time after the Second World War and everything. And it just happened so that Kuznetsova and Stepun liked him. And for some reason, they decided to give him their collection of letters and some photographs. So this is also the collection from well the the private collection of Stepun and Kuznetsova. He has the archives of Kuznetsova. I guess we're not heading to the Second World War times. We'll get to that. We'll get to that. And he lives in a house in France that is filled with hundreds of artworks, paintings that were mostly given to him by Russian artists, and they worth millions nowadays. So he claims to have the entire archives of Kuznetsov and Stepun, but the world has seen so far just several photographs and just some of the letters and diaries. So there is a lot more that still hasn't been published. And it's a bit of a dodge because nobody has ever seen the entire collection. And well, there were some other stories that kind of something doesn't really check there. But yeah, indeed, he indeed showed to public some other bits of collection, some letters from other writers and some other artworks. So that's interesting. And there's apparently a lot more to expect that should be published, maybe at some point. I don't know. So maybe we will learn a lot more of what the relationship between Bunin and Kuznetsova were, what the relationship between her and Stepun were, and many other things. But so far, it's just, well, it's the decision of Gara not to publish them. He claims that he had never even read the diary because he just thinks it's not his business. A bit dodgy. I don't know what to think, but it is what it is. At least we have some photos. At least it's quite suggestive. So, and I will tell you what happened to Kuznetsova and Stepun and Bunin in the upcoming episodes. So we are now approaching. We will be talking about the approaching Nazi occupation of Paris. We'll be talking about the Second World War time. We were talking about the word slipped my mind. That's it. So it's blame the wine. We'll think about the resistance movement, the la résistance, as I finally remember it. So the resistance movement and also the participation of the Russians in the resistance movement and also the participations of Russians in the support of Hitler as well. Yeah, many things. So I think we're gonna need maybe 1 or 2 more episodes with regards to Paris, and we're approaching the Second World War times. Yeah, so let's have a Q&A. Sorry, I just could not stop halfway through reading Bunin. I just had to go with it. And let's have a Q&A so I can stay a little longer because only in 30 minutes from now, I will be doing my last tour for tonight. And this is going to be a palace of Peter the Great in St. Petersburg, a summer palace of Peter the Great. As I said, the rehearsal for Peterhof in a way. So I'm going to share the links just in case for those who joined a little later. I'm not sure if you can see the link. Sometimes you can, sometimes you cannot. And also for tours tomorrow, the Batumi live stream, the tours about bad habits of the Soviet people, alcoholism and other addictions. And then I'll be talking about the Art Nouveau in Moscow, turn of the 20th century, late 19th century, my favorite architect, which I'm sure you've never heard of. And I'll be taking it to Jerusalem, as usual. The chat is open, so let me know if you have any questions. Again, I'm so sorry. I just totally ignored the Q&A. Thank you, Dorley. Thank you so much. Yeah, so this tour has been almost exclusively about Ivan Bunin, just as I mentioned it, and I decided to add this in the tour description. I just thought that I've never really spoken a lot about him, and since he was recognized in immigration, and his name must ring a bell. Well, may ring a bell to some of you since he spent most of his life in France, and he stayed throughout the occupation. And yes, Bunin helped. Bunin, I'll just kind of give you a little bit of a teaser. He helped cover some Jews in his home, and he risked his own life for that. So I will speak about it next time for sure. It just needs a lot more to be spoken of before that. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me. Thank you, Cindy. I'm happy that you find it fascinating, romantic, sad, romantic, sad. Yes, I guess this is just this St. Petersburg vibe that never really wore off. It just, I mean, you just cannot really. You can leave St. Petersburg, but St. Petersburg will never, never, never really leave you, right? Thank you, Ronaldin. Thank you so much. Yes, yeah. Apparently now you know that I really like Bunin. But there are very good translation of Bunin. Life of Arsenyev, Dark Alleys. Well, Life of Arsenyev is it's really heartbreaking to read. It's not horrible. I mean, but it's just really heartbreaking because of all that nostalgia. And Dark Alleys is very good read because it's spicy, because it's about love, because it's about eroticism. Yeah, indeed. Very good. So they're very good reads. Really one of my favorite. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, everyone. I'll see you soon on virtual tours for the tour of Palace of Peter the Great. Thank you so much for joining me. I will see you very soon, and thank you for your support. They have the links, PayPal. You could buy me coffee, and I will be sharing the recordings around these days for sure. Thank you so much. Now I have about 15 minutes to start packing, and then another tour, and then the entire night is mine to just make sure my boys have packed everything and haven't packed the TV with them. Is it still there? Yeah, it's still on the wall. That's good. Thank you so much, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.